Okay, I want you to picture something for me.
All right, I'm with you.
Imagine you are holding a glass. It's a very delicate glass, and it is filled to the absolute brim with water. And you have to walk down this long hallway.
Oh, I'm already nervous.
Right, maybe there's a white carpet involved, and you just know that if you spill even a single drop, it's going to make a terrible mess. What do you do?
Well, you walk carefully. Very, very carefully. You take tiny steps.
Exactly. You hold your breath. You become, the definition of caution.
That sounds like a pretty standard description of just trying to be a responsible human being.
Right. I mean, in almost every context we know that being careful, trying to keep everything clean, managing your behavior, that's a virtue. It's what we teach our kids. Be careful, don't make a mess.
Of course.
But, and here is where things get really weird, what if I told you that according to the text we are breaking down today, that exact instinct, that being careful is actually a trap?
A trap.
Yeah. In fact, the source we're reading argues that this exact carefulness might actually be paving your road to hell.
It's a jarring way to start, I'll admit. But you've really hit on the central paradox of the material we're looking at today.
It's a big one.
Yeah. We are diving into a text that argues the person most likely to be saved isn't the one trying their hardest to be good. It's actually the person who just admits they are the world's worst sinner.
Talk about a marketing problem for a religion, right? Come join us, we're the worst.
It's not a great slogan.
But seriously, today we are doing a deep dive into a very specific, and I have to say, a very intense sermon. It's titled, Human Beings Are Born Sinners.
And it focuses on a passage from the Bible, Mark chapter 7, verses 20 through 23.
And it comes from chapter 2 of a book by a pastor, Paul C. Jong, called Have You Truly Been Born Again of Water and the Spirit?
And just to set the stage for you, this is not a self-help book. This isn't 5 steps to a better you.
No.
This text is more like a demolition crew for your self-esteem.
No kidding. I read through this and I felt like I needed a shower afterwards.
That's actually the intended effect. The mission for this deep dive is to figure out why the author is so aggressive about this. We need to unpack his really uncompromising definition of human nature.
And we have to get into this really fascinating glass analogy he uses.
Exactly. And ultimately, we need to explain why he thinks most of the nice people you know are living under a dangerous illusion.
So let's start with that diagnosis. The title is Human Beings Are Born Sinners. Now, usually if I call someone a sinner or, just a bad guy, I'm reacting to something they did.
Right, it's action-based.
They cut me off in traffic, they cheated on their taxes, maybe they kicked a puppy. But this author seems to be saying, no, put the actions aside for a second.
That is the fundamental distinction the text makes. It's the difference between sins, plural, the things you do, and sin, singular, the thing you are.
The thing you are.
The author defines a human being not as someone who occasionally makes mistakes, but as a massive fin. He actually uses the phrase, a brood of evildoers.
Brood of evildoers. That sounds like a line from a fantasy novel about orcs or something.
It's harsh.
It feels incredibly harsh to apply to, say, my grandmother or a toddler.
It does, and the author anticipates that pushback. But he points to that passage in Mark 7. He lists the things that Jesus says come from within a person. And it's quite the laundry list.
It's on it.
It includes evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, greed, malice.
Okay. Looking at that list, murder, theft. I feel like most people listening are going to say, okay, I might be a little arrogant sometimes or maybe a little foolish, but I'm not a murderer. I'm not a thief.
Of course.
So how does he justify lumping everyone together like that?
Well, the author's argument is that the seed is there. He asserts that these aren't learned behaviors. You don't learn envy from a textbook. You don't, take a class on how to be arrogant.
True. I've never seen a syllabus for Greed 101.
Exactly. The text argues that the impulse originates entirely from the human heart. It's hardwired.
From the start?
From the start. He uses this really vivid image from Isaiah 59 about hatching viper's eggs. The idea is if you have a viper's egg, even if it hasn't hatched yet, even if the snake hasn't bitten anyone, what is inside that egg?
A viper. Venom.
Right. So the author argues that from the moment of conception, even as a cute baby, that nature, that venom is present. It just hasn't had the opportunity to manifest fully yet.
That is a terrifying thought. It basically says we are ticking time bombs of bad behavior. But let's play devil's advocate here. If we're all walking around with this venom inside us, Why does society function?
A fair question.
Why aren't we all just constantly murdering and stealing? I look around and I see people donating to charity, helping old ladies across the street, returning lost wallets.
That's the million-dollar question. If we are such monsters, why do we look so decent?
Yeah.
The text dedicates a whole section to this called "People are confused and live under their own illusions." The argument is that we are masters of camouflage.
Camouflage.
Think about Adam and Eve in the garden. What's the first thing they did when they realized they were naked?
They hid. Right. They sewed fig leaves together and hid in the trees.
The author says we are still doing that. Only today, the trees we hide behind are culture, education, and moral reputation. We use those things to cover up the massive sin underneath. And the biggest tool we use to maintain this illusion is comparison.
Oh, the classic, at least I'm not that guy.
Precisely. We see a criminal in the news, someone who committed a horrific crime, and we gasp. We say, how could a human being do such a thing? The author says that reaction is actually a form of self-deception.
How so?
By acting shocked, by othering the criminal, we get to feel morally superior. We tell ourselves, I am a different species than that person.
But the text is saying we are the same species.
Yes. The text argues that under the right or wrong circumstances, given the right pressure, that viper's egg in us would hatch the exact same way. The only reason it hasn't is likely circumstance or fear of consequence, not because our nature is fundamentally pure.
That reminds me of the Socrates quote the author brings up, know yourself.
It's ironic, right? Socrates is the father of Western philosophy, but the text argues most people fail his most basic command. We don't know ourselves because we don't want to know ourselves.
Because it's too scary.
If we really looked, if we really peeled back the culture and the manners and the fear of getting caught, we would see that brood of evildoers and be absolutely terrified.
But wait, what about conscience? I mean, I feel guilty when I do something wrong. Doesn't that prove I have a good nature fighting a bad one?
The text acknowledges the conscience. It says the conscience whispers, it is shameful when we sin. But the author argues we misuse that signal. We treat the sin like a glitch, like, oops, I made a mistake, let me fix that. We admit the action was wrong, but we refuse to admit the nature is wrong. We think we are good people who did a bad thing.
And the author says?
The author says, no, you are a bad tree that produced bad fruit, because that's what bad trees do.
This brings us to the central analogy of the entire text. And I have to say, this visual really stuck with me. It's the glass analogy.
This is the core visualization, yeah.
Can you walk us through how the author sets this up?
Sure. He asks us to imagine that a human being, you, me, anyone listening, is a vessel made of glass.
Okay.
And this glass isn't empty. It is filled to the absolute brim with filthy, dirty liquid. That liquid represents sin.
Okay, so I'm a glass full of sludge. That's flattering.
Stick with it. Now you have to live your life, you have to move, you have to go to work, interact with your family, deal with stress. What happens to a glass filled to the brim when it moves?
If it spills, it has to.
That's the key. In this analogy, the spill is what we typically call a sin. A lie slips out. A lustful thought spills over. An act of greed splashes onto the table. The movement is just living.
So the spilling is inevitable.
Because of what is inside.
And here is where I think the author attacks the way most of us try to be good. Because when I spill, let's say I lose my temper and yell at my kids, my instinct is to clean it up.
Of course.
I apologize. I buy them ice cream. I promise I'll be more patient next time.
In the analogy, that is you grabbing a dishcloth. You spill, and you immediately try to wipe it up. You wipe the outside of the glass. You mop the table.
And I look at it and say, okay, I cleaned up the mess. I'm good now.
But the glass is still full.
Ah, that's the author's point.
Yes. The level of the liquid hasn't gone down. You wipe the outside, but the heart, the inside, is still a massive sin. The author argues that this cycle of spilling and wiping, sinning and repenting, it's futile.
Because as soon as I move again...
What happens? You spill again. You can wipe it with a towel, a mop, a high thread count sheet. It doesn't matter. You are treating the symptom, the spill, while ignoring the disease, the contents of the glass.
And this loops back to the careful person from the intro.
It does.
Because if I accept that I'm full of filth and I don't want to spill, the logical strategy is to stop moving. Or to move so rigidly that nothing sloshes over.
Right. And this is the ascetic, the monk, or just the extremely uptight moralist.
Yeah.
The person who watches every word, follows every rule, judges everyone else. The text calls this person a sinner in disguise.
A sinner in disguise.
Because by being so careful, they're managing the appearance of sin without addressing the presence of sin. They're deceiving others, and worse, the text says they're deceiving God.
Ow.
They're basically saying, look, God, my glass is dry on the outside. I'm clean.
Right.
Meanwhile, the sludge is right there, brim deep.
So the text says that being careful puts you on the road to hell because it prevents you from asking for help.
Exactly. If you think you can manage the spills yourself, why would you need a savior? A doctor is only for the sick. If you've convinced yourself you're healthy, or at least that you can manage your symptoms with enough dishcloths, you'll never go to the hospital.
So who is the hero in this story? If the careful moral person is the villain.
The hero, strangely enough, is the person who gives up. It's the person who looks at the glass, looks at the mess they've made, and realizes, I cannot clean this. I am a disaster.
The admission of total defeat.
Yes. The text contrasts two types of prayers to illustrate this. First, there's the prayer of the person the author considers rejected. This person prays, God, I have this little bit of sin. I slipped up today. Please forgive me for this one thing, and I promise I will never do it again.
Which, to be fair, is probably how 99% of religious people pray.
Right. Sorry about that. Won't happen again. And the source calls that a lie.
A lie.
A flat-out lie. Because according to the glass analogy, saying, I will never do it again, is a promise you physically cannot keep. You are a massive sin. You will spill again. So you're lying to God about your own nature.
Okay, so what's the prayer that actually works?
The accepted prayer is the one that offers no excuses and makes no promises. It says, God, I am a massive sin. I am a brood of evildoers. I am going to hell. Please save me.
Wow. I am a massive sin.
That is a hard thing to say in the mirror.
It is. But the author claims it's the only truth. God doesn't save those who have a little bit of sin. He only saves those who admit they are completely full of it.
So let's pivot to the solution here. Because admitting I'm a mess is step one, but that doesn't clean the glass. It just acknowledges the dirt.
Right.
How does the text say the glass actually gets emptied?
This is where we have to get into the specific theology of the book, which centers on what he calls the gospel of the water and the spirit. The author argues that most modern Christians get the solution wrong.
Because they treat Jesus' forgiveness like a credit card they have to keep paying off.
Like, I sinned today, so I need to swipe the card again to cover it.
Right, the daily repentance model. I sin, I ask forgiveness, I'm clean. I sin again tomorrow, ask forgiveness, clean again. The author argues this is illogical.
Oh, why?
If you have to ask for forgiveness for specific sins every day, it implies that Jesus' sacrifice didn't actually cover your future sins.
The text has a pretty provocative line about this. Something about killing his son repeatedly.
Yeah, it argues that asking for forgiveness for individual sins implies God must repeatedly kill his son for every new mistake you make. It turns redemption into a fragmented process.
So what's the alternative? How does the water and the spirit fix this?
The author points to a specific mechanism. The transfer of fin. You know how in a mortgage, you have the principal, the main chunk of debt, and then the interest?
Sure.
The author argues that trying to clean up individual sins is like paying pennies on the interest, while the principal debt, your sinful nature, remains untouched.
So you need to clear the whole debt.
The entire liability. In a massive one-time transfer.
And the text says this happened at the Jordan River.
Yes, and this is crucial to his whole argument. He believes that when John the Baptist baptized Jesus, that wasn't just a ceremony. It was the moment of legal transfer.
Like the scapegoat in the Old Testament.
Exactly. The high priest would lay hands on a goat to transfer the sins of the people onto it. The author argues that John the Baptist acted as that representative for all humanity.
So when he laid his hands on Jesus,
In the water, all the sin of the world past, present, and future was transferred from us into Jesus. The glass of filth was essentially poured out of humanity and into Christ.
so the idea is that the filth isn't in me anymore, even if I spill.
That's the radical claim. If you believe that transfer happened, then your glass has been emptied and taken away. So when you spill, when you make a mistake in daily life, it's not a sin that condemns you to hell anymore.
Because the judgment for it was already transferred.
And paid for on the cross.
So the person who understands this doesn't wake up terrified of spilling.
Exactly. They aren't trying to wipe themselves clean with morality or apologies because they believe the cleaning was a one-time finished event. They are free from the compulsion to be careful in that fearful, deceptive way.
That brings up the Isaiah 59 quote the text uses. Your iniquities have separated you from your God.
Right. The gap between a holy God and a glass of filth, human, is infinite. You can't bridge that gap by being a nice guy or walking carefully.
The text says God's hand isn't too short to save.
But our sin is a barrier. And the only way that barrier is removed is if the sin is taken away entirely, not just suppressed, not just wiped off the surface, but transferred out.
It really is a complete dismantling of the good person myth. I think we all secretly want to be the hero of our own story.
Of course you do.
We want to be the one who overcomes our flaws and acts right. But this text is saying, no, stop trying to be the hero. Admit you're the villain. Admit you're the wretch.
And that's the hardest thing for the human ego to do. The author calls our culture a vile culture, specifically because it helps us prop up that ego.
With etiquette and social media.
All of it. We build entire systems just to avoid admitting what we really are. It's hiding in the trees again. And the text warns that this hiding is fatal. It says, God only delivers those who know themselves to be masses of sin.
It's a paradox.
The only way to be clean is to admit you are filthy. The moment you claim you're pretty good, you're on your own.
You know, it changes the definition of a believer in this context completely. It's not the person who behaves the best.
No.
It's the person who has stopped lying about their imperfection.
That's a powerful way to put it. It's the cessation of the lie. It's dropping the dishcloth and saying, look at this mess. I can't fix it.
It's strange because usually when we talk about religion or theology, it feels like a list of demands. Do this, don't do that.
A checklist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this perspective, if you really buy into it, it feels like a relief.
It's the relief of giving up an impossible task. Imagine if your job was to carry that full glass of water across a tightrope. And if you spilled, you were fired. You'd be a nervous wreck.
I'd be paralyzed.
Now imagine someone comes along and says, I already took the water. The glass is empty. You can just walk across. You might still stumble. You might still look foolish. But the catastrophic consequence is gone.
But the catch is, you have to let them take the water. You can't say, no thanks, I've got this. I'm really good at balancing.
Right. If you clutch the glass, you keep the risk.
This has been a really intense look at human nature. It certainly makes you look in the mirror and at your neighbors a little differently.
Know yourself, as Socrates said. But be prepared for the fact that the self you find isn't going to be pretty.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought to chew on. We talked about the text's dismissal of daily repentance, that ritual of saying, I'm sorry, I won't do it again.
A ritual he calls a deception.
Because we will do it again. It's inevitable.
Right.
So if we accept that premise, how does that shift the way we view our daily mistakes? Instead of frantic apologies and promises we can't keep, what if the only honest response to a mistake isn't, I'll do better next time, but simply, this is exactly who I am?
That's a scary pivot.
It is. But according to this source, that terrifying admission might be the only one that counts. It stops the cycle of pretending and opens the door to the kind of rescue the author is talking about. It's something to think about the next time you spill. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure.
See you next time.